Can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So like Alex said, my presentation here is about workflow automation. Quite literally, this is not hyperbole. I hate hyperbole. I've come up with these systems to literally win back hundreds of hours per year. The idea, the rationale behind that, Alex had kind of given my heads up here that I am the founder of the content studio. I was the original editor of CXL. I was the first marketing hire at Shopify Plus and became the global editor in chief at QuickBooks. Now, what is behind that though, is I went from a single person contributor running a relatively small blog. I mean, CXL has become huge, but at the time it was growing, to becoming the editor-in-chief over at Shopify Plus and the first marketing hire. So watching a team expand rapidly. When I was there, I started as employee number 14, and by the time I left, there were 300 employees. And then moving over to QuickBooks, I started a team that had 10 authors originally, and we scaled it out to be 40 plus contributors across 16 markets. Now, in most of these cases, I was also the only content marketing hire, or one of very few content marketing hires at the time. So having these operations expand while I was a part of these programs, or while I was running these programs, made it very, very difficult to stay on top of things. So I really started to get into content automation or workflow automation and optimization to make sure that I could spend more of my time focusing on creating high quality work instead of spending a lot more time managing the work. Because once you start reaching a certain threshold and you're publishing at a regular cadence, I think anybody here can speak to this, you spend a lot more time just doing menial tasks instead of spending a lot more time focusing on the work itself. So that's kind of a heads up there. So the ideal for every content marketer is that we want to do the big multi-integrated, multi-channel approach, right? We've, we're trying to do it all. We've got the blogs, the emails, the podcasts. We want all of these things to reference each other. And unless you're Omniscient Digital, there's only so much bandwidth. You can't really do it all. And yet we're still trying to. So I'm going to throw a whole bunch of slides here and research at you. But according to a study by Airtable recently this year, they researched 300 marketers, and 80% of them said in the last year that their workload has increased. And 86% of that has reported that it's been a major stress on their teams. Now, if we think about what's happened in the last year with COVID and all of the content that everybody else has had to create around it, I know I was certainly caught up in talking about PayPal protection loans and servicing the small business community, really trying to help people get through that period of time. That workload increasing does increase the amount of stress, but also if they didn't have the proper infrastructure to support that increased workflow, that only is going to break these systems that are in place. Now, if we look at what those major factors were here, we're going to see that the increase of volume of campaigns is the major one. But the major ones that stand out to me are operational complexity, challenging collaborating with stakeholders, inefficient workflows, and gaps in current tools. These are huge challenges that any content marketer has, especially when they're operating at a much larger scale. Is if we take a step back and we really think about what it is to produce this amount of, like, a high volume of work, if you're just trying to manage things through email, or you're going back and forth with folks and doing it through Slack, and without a real proper workflow, like Elena was talking about here, that's one thing, right? Just keeping that stuff organized is one thing. But when you start scaling out collaborations with multiple people, the friction between those steps to get something from one person to another increases, and it increases greatly. So the more people you have involved, the more friction there's going to be, and the more what's called organizational drag starts to happen and pulls down a piece of content from getting produced. So this doesn't really surprise me that some of these major sources of stress have to do with operations and workflow, and a lot of this stuff can be automated. When we look at the amount of time it takes for people to ship, the majority of people are saying that they strongly agree with how frustrated they are to ship campaigns. And that's primarily because, again, we have this organizational drag that's happening along the way. So that amount of time that it takes just to do menial tasks or get sign off from one person to another, it increases the amount of friction. So it makes it so you're not shipping as fast as you'd like to. And if we look at some other research here, we'll see that the majority of people here are saying that they spend the majority of their time focusing on manual operational tasks, right? So I'll get into some examples of what this might look like in a little bit here. And I'll give you 3 common examples and then ways that I've solved for them. And if we look at how much time or how much of that time is being spent automating or synchronizing those tasks across different tools, we're going to see that a good majority of the people, again, say that they are doing a lot of time manually updating tasks. And the research further goes to show that on average, a person operates, a marketer operates with 20 plus tools in their tool stack. And I was trying to quantify this the other day, looking at 20 plus tools. That sounds insane. But then I did an audit of what my different tools, the different tool stacks that I use are. And man, I came up with all of these. And then when I start thinking about when I collaborate with other people, those are all the other tools that I use, right? So I prefer to work in Google Docs. My workflow tool of choice is Airtable. I keep my notes in Google Keep. I use Ahrefs to manage my link audits and my keyword optimization, right? These are the tools that I use. But then when I work with other collaborators, they might use Word or Asana or Trello or Jira or Evernote or SEMrush or SEO Clarity. So you have all of these different tools that people use. And within larger organizations, what will happen, and even within mid-tier organizations, what happens is people will use these tools to work within their process. But if you've got 2 different sets of tools and you're trying to spend most of your time manually syncing, which we'll see, a lot of people are spending most of their time synchronizing information between tools, then again, that increases the amount of drag that happens within an organization. Alex, cut me off at any point here if I'm going too fast or any of this, because I know that there's going to be a lot to sort of wrap our heads around when it comes to this.
Perfect. Thanks, though.
All right, no problem. So I'm going to walk through a couple of different common scenarios within a content marketing operation. And I'll show you how I've solved for those and my tool stack to do that. Primarily, I'm using Airtable and Zapier. But the tools that you can use, I've done this with Trello, I've done it with Google Sheets. I'm pretty sure a lot of this stuff can be done with Asana. And I use Zapier to connect most of these things to increase the amount of, or decrease the amount of friction and increase the amount of smoothness that's happening along the way. So a common example here is we'll do keyword research. Say we're going to send an outline to an author, right? Very, very simple process, or at least on the surface, it seems very simple. So initially we're going to do our keyword research and we're going to export all that information to a Google Sheet. So we have our big keyword list in the Google Sheet, and that's what we're going to operate off of to create our outlines and to basically frame the articles that we're putting out there. And then if I go through the different steps, when I really start breaking this down, okay, so I have the copy of the SEO template that I'm going to copy and paste over, or I'm going to create a copy of that so I can send that to the author. And after I inserted all the keyword information in there, I'm going to write the outline, then I'll email the author. Then the author will email that back to me eventually, and so I can review the draft. Then I'm going to copy the draft into WordPress, right? Or I might insert that drafts link into my workflow tool. And then I will insert that information into into WordPress. I'll clean up the code. I'll insert the different images. I'll schedule. I'll publish. And if you really start to break this down, this can take anywhere between 12 to 15 steps, right? Now, okay, those are 12 and 15 steps. We just sort of acknowledge that they're there and this is what we do. But we're also using, 6 to 7 tools throughout this entire process. And if we've nailed it all down, we might be able to get this all down to maybe 5-10 minutes. Okay, that doesn't seem unreasonable, but when you start adding these little pieces of time up, 10 minutes, if you're publishing at 3 times per week, that's 30 minutes a week you're losing. Extrapolate that all the way out to the end of the year, and you spent a full 24 hours a year just creating outlines, right? That is insane to me. And that's provided everything goes smoothly. You know, you're spending a lot of time, you're copying and pasting information from one tool to another, and it really creates this, it makes it so you're not spending time focusing on the content. Instead, you're focusing on managing the content. And that's not ideal for anybody who's trying to do creative work. So the way that I've solved for this, and again, I use Airtable. I'm a huge Airtable evangelist. I know that this can be done in other tools because I've done it. But what I do in Airtable is I first create this big old keyword list. Actually, before I keep going here, show of hands, just in the chat, how many people here use Airtable? That's going to be interesting. I can't really see that right now, Alex. So can you kind of, if people are talking about that, can you kind of call that out?
Yep, for sure.
Yeah. So how many people here are using Airtable?
Uno, dos, tres.
So we got a few. All right, cool.
Couple.
All right, cool. So what I like to do is I'll create a linked table, right? So I'll do the big old keyword list. I'll insert all of my information from Ahrefs into the big old keyword list, and then I'll link records back and forth. So the information on the big old keyword list can then be inserted into my primary workflow here. Now, for anybody who doesn't use Airtable, what this does is it allows us to keep our keyword list in one place, right? So we're not moving between, you know, a Google Sheet, for example, and your other primary workflow tool. We're keeping all of the information in Airtable to have the big old keyword list, and then where I spend most of my time in the workflow, I'm able to insert that information dynamically, so I can see directly from the content that I'm creating or from the record of what I'm creating, all of the information I need. So the keyword difficulty, the volume, any search features that might be in there, all of that information, I can access it directly from the record of what I'm creating. So to go back to the automation itself, so I'll start by inserting the information in the big old keyword list. I'll add my keywords to the record. And then to automate this, I will have a zap in Zapier that basically will say, whenever a record is in a certain view, I have my views separated by status. So what this is really saying is whenever a record is in a certain status, so whether it's in production or for review or ready to be assigned to an author, and in this case, it's ready to be assigned to an author, when that record is in the view of needs assignment, there's going to be a couple of different formatting things that take place here to pull out, to clean up some code. And then once that happens, we're going to create a document in Google Docs that has all of the information I need. Now, this is all automatically created as soon as I flip a status from a validated idea to the idea needs assignment. And what happens in this document is that all of this information that I would normally fill out, where the headline, the URL, the motivation of the everything else, right? All of this is all inserted in Airtable once. And then when I flip this status, all of these other things start to be created. The other thing that this automation will do is it will automatically send the author the email that says, hey, all of this stuff is ready to go. So all I have to do is spend my time in one tool, and then the outline is created and it's emailed to the author, and everything that I've inserted for the information here, or everything that is necessary to create a good piece of content, is already there. And I've only had to spend my time in one place and do really one step once I've done all my pre-work. So that's how I've solved the creating outlines. Again, Alex, David, anybody, like, stop me if you need me to. Okay, so to finish that out, the way that I do this too is within Airtable, I also keep a authors table. So I have all of the authors that I need right there. So I try to build my entire content operation out of this one single place. So I have all of the authors that I need, and you can see here that I've got their first name, their last name, their contact information. There are another number of other things that I have here. And then when I go to assign the article, again, we're looking at needs assignment, all I have to do is click this writer field right here. I'll click this, it'll bring the author up, and then when the article is ready to go and I say it's assigned, the rest of this information, again, it automates itself. So the end result is that the author gets the email that says, here's everything you need to know to create this piece of content. Also, I decided that I am going to be a legendary musician, and I've put myself amongst greats here. So another really common example that we have are customer case studies, right? And when I was at Shopify Plus, our major cornerstone of our strategy was to create a new case study every week. We wanted to do one every Friday. At the time, Shopify wasn't as much of a powerhouse as it is now. People didn't take it seriously within the enterprise space. So our big competitive advantage was actually being small, where we could do a case study every week because we had closer access to our customers, and we wanted to highlight different parts of the product and our customer stories through storytelling. But to do that, there's a lot of operational complexity, right? We had a few different these are some of the cool case studies. We had Marshawn Lynch and Oreo and Lisa. But to do all of this, right? And anybody who works within a large organization, you might also kind of feel this within bigger content organizations with 1,000 or plus employees. About a quarter of them have 0 to 1 person dedicated to full-time content marketing. This is research taken by Content Marketing Institute and Marketing Profs. About a quarter of organizations have 0 to 1 people managing content marketing. And when I was at Shopify Plus, this was certainly the case, and the company was growing. Our customer success team was growing, and these requests were starting to come in from people, but also we were pulling this information. So I had to come up with a way to manage all of this from a very quick way. So when we start looking at the steps that were involved with creating a case study, it wasn't just a matter of reaching out to people. We had to talk to our customer success managers. We had to reach out to the customer. We had to schedule interviews. The author would then write the article and then submit the article for review. Once we were done with that, we had to send the customer a review, right, to let them have the final say as to whether or not it was something they needed to do or something we were able to do. And again, now we're adding more people to this mix. And by having more people in this mix, we're increasing the amount of potential for human error, first of all, but we're also increasing the amount of time it takes to get a piece of content out. So if we're able to, let me take a step back there. The big challenge with that is if I'm starting to get inundated with other work because I am the only content marketing hire there, then I might forget or I might lose a piece of content or miss an interview or any of that. I might be frantically trying to come up with this information or get on top of doing the case studies while I'm trying to balance a bunch of other work. Whereas we have a very solid operation here. And if these things are happening automatically, so we have a method, and I'll show you this in a second. We have a method of doing content intake with our customer success managers. We have a way of automating scheduling with our authors and customers. And we have a way of automating content coming to us when it's ready to go for review. We're reducing a lot of those areas where there's human error involved, and we're building up the habits that are more aligned with software usage. So I like to think about these as creating closed loop systems where if I'm on Facebook, the reason we keep going back to Facebook, and an old millennial at this point, but the reason why we go back to any of our social media softwares is because we've been trained to, once we get that notification, we have to see what happens. And we want to put that input in so we get those notifications. Well, this is kind of the same idea with designing systems like this, is that we're trying to get notified when we are part of the process and when these parts of the process come up for us. So we create the systems and the automations around that. So what we've done here, right, and we look at more of these steps, right? The author makes the revisions to the article. If the customer says they need to, then we upload it into WordPress. We strip the junk code. We insert images, schedule, publish. To make part of that process a lot simpler, getting the email to the customer when their case study is ready for review, again, we can set up an automation here. So I'll set up the customer's email inside my workflow, and then I can set up a trigger that says, ultimately, when this case study enters the status for review, or customer review rather, then they can get this email that has that basically says, hey, your case study is ready for review. Please give us your feedback and comments. We'd like to publish it around this time. So we'd like to be able to do that. Once we get that information back from the author, we're going to also get an automated message within Slack that says, hey, the customer sent back the case study, so you can take a review. So again, we're talking about creating these closed loop systems. That's where we're starting to build up these habits of getting into the automation, or having the automation tell you what to do next, and really creating these systems that make it so your level of human, so you don't have to be managing the work. You can spend their time in the places where you're primarily spending your time anyways. So where do you start, right, with any of this? You start by asking yourself, for any given task, how many steps are there, right? So you'll see in these last two examples that I've broken these down by different steps. So you have to ask, what are those steps that you're taking to get to the finished product? And then once we break those down, the question then becomes, well, what steps require basically the same manual input all the time? So in these cases, right, I'm constantly copying and pasting keyword data, right? In the first example, I'm constantly copying and pasting keyword data over to a document that I'm always creating copies of, that I'm always sending to my authors with the same form email every single time. And then you have to ask, what are my tools capable of doing? I didn't put this in the slide, but what are my tools capable of doing that I can automate? And then overall, how can we reduce the number of tools that we're spending our time in? Now, this doesn't mean that we're not still using these tools, but in both of these systems that I've shown, right, in both of those scenarios, what we're doing is not spending time in the tool so much as having the tool come to us at those appropriate moments in time. So how can we reduce the number of tools we're using, and how can we reduce the number of manual inputs that we're doing? And again, these are the different steps that it would take to create a single outline and send it over to the author. And if you want to get started with this, I've created very complex systems here. But if you want to get started, right, the idea is to start small. You don't have to create a big complex machine. You can do something as simple as, when an author reaches this, or when a piece of content reaches this status, then send a Slack message. A lot of these tools are very easy to use with Zapier or within Airtable. So it's not rocket science in a lot of cases here. The idea is that you just start small and start building these systems iteratively over time. And the last thing I have here, and Alex, is it okay if I sent you a message on Twitter, but is it okay if I talk about the last part here?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, cool. So I actually am running a beta test of a program right now that goes through that first scenario right now specifically, where we're creating automated outlines like I was showing here. But there are also a number of other things that we'll be doing, like content intake from multiple parts of the company, where we could sort out which pieces of content are being asked for. So if somebody's sending a blog post, for example, all the questions that are necessary for a blog post, that will get sent to one place, and we can start to filter out those information, the pieces that we need from those different types of content that we're being put out there. So if you want to check that out, it's bit.ly/automation microcourse. It is a very janky link right now. It's completely a very minimum viable form, but so far we've gotten some pretty good feedback from that. So yeah, that's me. I will.
Tommy, that was amazing. Thank you very much. I've said this before to you, but your systems mindset blows me away. And the fact that you somehow combine that with also a storytelling and kind of a content purist mindset, I can't believe it. So again, I feel like this was free consulting for our agency, and I feel like we're going to take tons of these workflow automations practices and implement them without shame. I've got one question, kind of broad actually. It's two parts. So is there something that you want to automate, you've tried to automate, but haven't been able to yet, you think is possible? And then secondarily, is there something that you think should not be automated or is not automatable?
Oh my God, yes. So I was actually just going on a rant about this on Twitter yesterday. So I'll start with the second one. I do not believe in Calendly. I hate Calendly so much with a passion. And the reason for that is twofold. One, I don't believe that we should be asking people or having people say, to me, it feels very rude to say, my schedule is more important than yours. So come take a look at my schedule and see what fits for you, right? Somebody has to look at their calendar and then fit it in there. So I don't like Calendly, and I don't think that that is something that should be automated. And one of the two things that I've been trying to automate a lot, and I'm sure it can be done because there are APIs and everything available, is actually pulling in those keywords from Ahrefs. Something I have started automating as well, a little bit more, and I didn't show it in my system here, and I haven't really talked about it yet. But the cool part about Airtable right now is they also have an integration with Pexels, Unsplash, and a number of your other free tools for hero images. So that can be stuff that's automated as well, or at least brought to you instead of having to go to multiple places. You can just search it directly from your workflow, and then that's that.
Do you think all in that Airtable is one of the most automation friendly project management tools, or like why is Airtable your tool of choice?
Yeah, no, that's a great question because I've been a major shill for them lately. Yeah, they are right now. They are building the platform on an automation and app-based ecosystem. So I think that as the platform gets more robust, and as the app ecosystem becomes more robust, we're just going to see more of these possibilities as we've been going along. And I've been with them since before they were doing a lot of automation, like building in automation. So yeah, that's really where a lot of their project roadmap is going to make it so these workflows can be a lot simpler.
That's awesome. I'm a huge Airtable fan as well, and it does seem like it's a much more open platform. So
Yeah.
thought I would confirm that. All right, cool. Well, that's all the questions we have. Thank you so much for doing this. Again, I learned a ton, packed with value as always. So thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.